Marvel's lifted the curtain a bit on their big Iron Man event for 2020. So let's take a look at what that's all about, what new comics it is. Will there be new number ones? Of course, there will be new number ones. So let's talk about those. Hey there, everybody. This is Perch. We finally have a little bit more information on the Iron Man event that's been promised for a bit of time. We were told that we were going to lead to 2020. There's been a lot of teases that were leading to Iron Man 2020, and there's some history behind Iron Man 2020 that we wanted to dip into. And Iron Man as a title has been, in terms of just sales and general direction, I would call somewhat lifeless. It's or listless, maybe is a better way to put it. There's certainly fans of the book. People are buying it week after week, or sorry, month after month. But it's had some shipping delays. It's had kind of a meandering arc that involved the controller, and then the Ultron Hank Pym fused version, where Tony was Cronenberged with the Iron Man armor. It became kind of this merged character. We have Tony in a relationship with the Wasp, and it's been a book that's kind of had trouble finding its footing. And I think a lot of what the title was trying to bridge to or build to was 2020. So why is 2020 an important date for Iron Man? Well, way back in the early 80s, about 1984, 83, 84, you had a title called Machine Man. And Machine Man was actually part of is part of the current Iron Man run. He's had a relationship with Jocasta. There's been kind of an on and off where they're writing him a bit like his next wave version of himself, but it's just been kind of an ongoing thing. And in Machine Man, they introduced Arno Stark. And Arno Stark was Tony Stark's first cousin, once removed from Morgan Stark, and he had inherited the Stark Industries future. This was back in the 80s, where 2020 seemed like, oh, that's like 40 years away, who cares? And it was a popular run because the Arno basically was under the control of Sunset Bane, another character they've introduced and had in the current Dan Slott run of Iron Man. And the goal was that Arno in the armor was going to destroy Machine Man, and Arno was basically a kind of a mercenary. And so there's a bunch, that's an older story, not necessarily kind of what we're after talking about, but it was one of those time travel things that was popular around that time. So in current times, they've seen Arno Stark as a kind of half brother to Tony, and he was genetically altered at one point, intended to become like the true heir to Howard and Maria Stark. But he was crippled at the time, and then kind of during I believe this was Karen Gillian, or I think this is a Gillen run, not the Matt Fraction. Yeah, it was a Gillen run. They introduced this character. They turned it out on Seer that Tony Stark was not actually the true heir to Howard Stark, not his real son. And they were starting to build a new Mandarin city, and it was a big utopia that was going to kind of come about. And Arno kind of got frustrated. I know they had an odd relationship between Tony and Arno that had kind of come up, and they were seen as somewhat antagonists to each other. So Arno's been kind of this shadowy sub-character, sort of villain, but not really, working with Sunset Bane in Dan Slott's run. And that brings us to Iron Man 2020. So what does this mean? Well, it's an event. It's very similar to Hunted. It's an event within the comics. We don't necessarily have a true event series, although I suspect there is one, and we just don't necessarily realize it yet. But basically, starting off in January, we do not have an Iron Man title, and we get Iron Man 2020 #1, brand new relaunched issue. Arno is in the suit. And this is going to run through June. So basically, all the first half of the year, we're going to get a lot of Iron Man books. So you might be saying, well, wait a minute, what do you mean a lot of Iron Man books? Well, you have Iron Man 2020 #1. And then in February, we get Machine Man 2020 #1 and Forceworks 2020 #1. Forceworks is a 90s book that had, who did it have? It was kind of a West Coast Avengers style throw off, and it had a bunch of people. We had War Machine, and we had, I think Scarlet Witch was there. I think Wonder Man was there. U.S. Agent, Hawkeye, Spider Woman. I think that's it. No, I'm forgetting somebody. Anyway, so we're getting those. And then in March, we get Iron Age 2020, number one. Not sure what that is. And we get Rescue, which is which is Gwyneth Paltrow. That's Pepper Potts, or at least it has been, number one. So we basically, through this, we're going to get, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Iron Man, Force Works, Machine Man, Iron Age, Rescue, number one issues. And those will continue for a while until we get to May, and we get Ironheart 2020 number one as Riri Williams comes into the scene of this story, and then we get some classifieds. We get a classified number one and a classified number two in May and June, and hard to tell what those are, but it's kind of a tease that it starts with a W. If you look really close, there's a W in there, so maybe Wonder Man. It doesn't quite fit. Well, maybe it does, but anyway. So that's what we've got. So we've got, all in all, a nice, healthy little tie-in with it that's currently being solicited at, let's see, 8, 11, 14, 17, 18 books between January and June. 6 months, 18 books. You take one title, Iron Man, and take 6 books and turn it into 18. Not a bad trick. Anyway, that's the basic story of what we've got with the Iron Man 2020 event. Now, will this be good? Well, I mean, it promises kind of a reimagining of the Arno Stark, bringing that to a head. It's a celebration of that old 2020 storyline, which carries fond memories in a lot of people's hearts. And we're going to finally kind of deal with what Arno Stark is. I've heard rumors that we're going to undo the Tony Stark is not the true son. And this is going to be an event that will kind of realize that, no, it's not what you thought. And, there's more to see here. This is most likely going to bring back Tony Stark. I mean, the shame of this all is we've had Tony Stark was kind of robbed of his memories, dying by Matt Fraction, had to rebuild. And then he got there, and then he's yanked off of his feet by Karen Gillian, who's like, oh, you're not the real son. And that goes on. And then we get Bendis killing off Iron Man completely in Civil War and having, Riri and Dr. Doom be Iron Man. Then he gets back into the armor, and immediately Dan Slott Cronenberg's infuses him into his armor and kind of takes him off the shelf. So like Captain America, I'm just sitting here wondering, at what point are we just going to get an Iron Man run with Iron Man doing Iron Man things and being Iron Man? Why do we keep having to have this Tony Stark is stripped of the armor and then has to find his way back? And meanwhile, we're going to have a host of other people, whether it's Norman Osborn or Riri Williams or who Arno Stark now. How many people do we need to have in the armor before we finally just decide, hey, what would be cool is Tony Stark fighting some bad guys and doing some heroic things? That would be kind of cool. Anyway, big event 2020. Are you excited? Are you picking up Iron Man 2020 and all the tie-in issues and all the things going on? Let me know in the comments below. Were you a big fan of the original Iron Man 2020 storyline and have been anxiously hoping for more? Or is this a case where you just like to have the original memories just live as they are? Let me know that too. Otherwise, like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter for @Comic Perch, and most importantly, thank you for listening.